All right, we are back on Morning Line. Our guest, John Harris, with us. The TFA, Tennessee Firearms Association, a lobbying organization?
We do have a lobbying political action committee.
Do you not? I mean, or you go up and talk to lawmakers
I go
yourself.
talk to them.
I mean,
I'm
you're
considered. There's this weird definition under the Tennessee Lobbying Act where if you're not paid to do it, you're considered a volunteer lobbyist. Oh. So you don't register, and I refuse to accept compensation. I make a good living as an attorney.
Right.
So I donate for 20 years all of my time to TFA, and since I don't accept compensation, I'm considered a volunteer lobbyist.
Interesting.
Which has created some discussions from time to time.
But you don't get paid for it.
I don't get paid for it.
You're like any other citizen that may go up there and knock on a lawmaker's door and want to discuss something.
Yeah, the difference is that I spend a lot of time in my law practice dealing with these issues, so I have on certain components of it. I'm not like instructors that are experts on tactics, but when it comes to the legal issues of it, I've got a lot of experience, 2 decades worth of dealing with these issues in the legal system.
So you have several clients dealing with issues where maybe they have gotten in some type of legal mess because of where they took their guns or what the statute says.
Or disputes with the ATF over licensure and who can own what kind of guns. I mean, it's a broad area.
Were you involved in that one with the gentleman who had the tank in terms of getting everything he needed from the ATF to...
We are working on his issues still.
Still?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Cole, good morning, Cole.
Hello?
Hey, go ahead, Cole. Good morning.
Yes, I'd like to get Mr. Harris to comment on the 2014 law where you're legal to carry without a permit in your vehicle, shotgun, rifle, or pistol.
Oh, okay. What do you? I mean, he'll comment, but what do you want to know about it? Just
well, a lot of law enforcement and TWRA says that law doesn't exist. It's not real.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What's the reality here?
Write this down. The code section is Tennessee Code annotated.
All right, Marty.
39-17-1307 subpart E.
Say that one more time.
39-17-1307E.
Okay, so when
that's the code section.
So when someone from TWRA, if they say, "Oh, you can't do this," you say, "Sir, please check Tennessee Code 39-17."
And here's what the code says. Okay. The code says, if it went into effect in July of 2014, and it says, if you legally possess, so it doesn't even have to be yours. If you legally possess the vehicle, and it's not a company car where the employer has a no weapons policy, and it's not a government-provided employee car. So company cars excluded. And you legally possess the firearm, and it doesn't matter if it's a handgun, a rifle, or a pistol, it doesn't matter what kind of firearm it is. You can transport that weapon in that vehicle, no permit required.
Okay.
Loaded or unloaded, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Now, that's sort of a step in the right direction towards constitutional carry, and we're not a big fan of the law, though, the way it's written, because it's created a lot of gray areas. For example, we have statutes in Tennessee that says with respect to certain parking lots or with respect to public parks and other locations that if you're in possession of a firearm, you can go in those areas if you have a permit. Well, this law that went on the books about permitless transport doesn't apply to people then that go in those same locations unless they have their permit. But for traveling on most public streets, this law does.
It sounds like the law has been on the books for a while, but have you heard from others like Cole who have said, I've encountered some in law enforcement that maybe aren't fully aware of it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And the problem there is it's got to come through their training.
Okay.
They've got to be exposed to it. Or they've got to be told by a magistrate you can't charge them for that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Hey, he's got the code number now, so just cite that to him. We had an interesting question from a caller who couldn't stay on the line, but wondering if someone happens to be disabled and is in a motorized wheelchair, carrying a weapon in a motorized wheelchair, would the laws overlap with is the wheelchair considered a car?
No.
No, I would think not.
No,
I would think not. That's completely so don't worry about that.
Don't worry about that at all.
Okay. I mean, I just... Curious question, people, and it's fair. It's good that you asked that. I think Greg had a quick follow-up. Greg, good morning. Go ahead, buddy.
Hey, I think you might have already answered the question. Yeah, I was concerned about rifles. Say if we're going to a friend's house to go do some shooting and stuff, if you have a AR, AK, whatever you have, and you're carrying that in your gun, if that's also you can conceal. I mean, concealed carry is not just limited to handguns. that's rifles, shotguns, whatever you want to conceal. If it's a firearm, it's a firearm. Is that correct?
Not necessarily in Tennessee. Our permit in Tennessee is for carrying handguns, and we do not have a concealment requirement at all. Now, when it comes to the vehicle, you can transport openly or concealed in the vehicle any kind of firearm. Once you get out of the vehicle and you start walking around, it's handguns only.
You got that, Greg?
Yeah, but that, because I was just now thinking about that one incident where I think there was a guy that was walking around with an AK or something and someone called on him, but, I thought that a firearm is a firearm and it shouldn't be limited. That's just something maybe you can change in the law, because it shouldn't be limited to just handguns that you could carry. It should be any gun you could carry. I mean, a firearm's a firearm. That's what it kind of...
I do agree with you.
I do agree with you. What's happening is that they are conditioning the public to think that they're profiling people every time there's a shooting. They're profiling people and saying they're unstable, they're disabled, they're homeless, they don't have boyfriends, they don't have girlfriends. So when they profile a bunch of people that way, I could see in the future here them saying, well, you know what? When you were at the doctor's and you answered that questionnaire about your medical condition and have you ever felt suicidal before, they're going to say that, okay, everybody that's ever felt suicidal and answered that question, yes, when they go to the doctors, well, we're going to start, not allowing them to get handgun permits when it has. You see what I'm saying? Is I could see ahead of where this whole thing's going to end up. Is they're painting this picture that they could just label anybody as being mentally disabled or have some kind of mental issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's worse. Come on, I mean. You have a situation here where you can't really, that's what's so problematic. Donald Trump was talking about it too, the mental health issue and all. That stuff's HIPAA law protected. You say stuff, what are you going to do? Bust someone or keep someone from getting a gun for something they might do with it? You can't do that.
No, that's the thought police problem, and we don't have that in this country yet.
Thank goodness we don't.
But it's a real issue, I'll tell you frankly, because I've handled some of these cases, it's a real issue for our veterans. Because when they go to the VA and they're being checked out by VA medical staff, and they I had a case in East Tennessee where the guy said, I'm having difficulties handling routine tasks like balancing my checkbook. Well, his problem was neurological. He just didn't have the... But the nurse wrote it down as if it was mental. And all of a sudden, he gets a notice from the ATF, because if it's a VA patient, those do get reported. The HIPAA laws don't apply the same way. And so he got a notice saying that we're going to grant you disabilities based upon this mental limitation, which was misunderstood, and as a result of that, you're going to be disqualified from possessing or owning firearms. So, for most people, the HIPAA laws protect their mental diagnosis unless they get into the court system and they're found by a court to be incompetent. Those are public records.
And I think most rational people, you too, are not in favor of someone who's mentally unbalanced having a weapon.
That's true.
I mean, in general. Now, the problem is, how do you know this beforehand? And there are plenty of people who suffer from some degree of mental illness that are never violent and are not going to be a danger with a weapon and have a right to go target practice or hunting. So how do you know which one's the one that's going to go off the deep end?
Well, and it's even a little more complicated than that, because you have a situation where someone, as a result of a traumatic event, say the violent death of a spouse or a child, could be technically diagnosed as being depressed. Okay. Sure. Which is could be lifelong, but in some instances, for some people, it's a short-term coping issue. Well, that puts them into the books as having been diagnosed with a mental illness, and unfortunately, the way the laws are currently written, there's no relief from that once it happens.
And that's unfortunate. It has to be there has to be specifics and clear so that it's not all painted. Mental illness, you hear that. There's all kinds of degrees of that. Like you just described, that kind of depression, everyone gets something like that at some point.
And see, the way our legislature currently looks at it, you take a leg, for example, broken leg. You can have a broken leg that heals and becomes functional again, or you could have an amputation. Well, from our General Assembly currently on the books, every mental illness, even if it's temporary, like depression as a result of a traumatic death, is the equivalent of an amputation. You never get over it. And so it can be permanently disqualifying. And it shouldn't be that way. There ought to be a relief mechanism where a doctor can certify, or you can be found to be normally functioning again and regain those impaired rights.
Let's go. Is it Carly? Are you there? Is it Carly? Charlie, I'm sorry. Charlie, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, the gun laws in the country, this all depends on 3 or 4 or 5 incidents we've had in the last few years. And people have to understand, gun laws are made for mostly honest people. People that are going to break the law or want handguns, they're going to street buy them, steal them, whatever. They're still going to find them. And there's people talking about taking guns away from everybody in the United States. Well, you do. Look what happened when other countries have done this. Crime went up 90 to 200%. If nobody in their homes have handguns or weapons to protect themselves, you're going to come to a point where civil law is not going to take effect. Everybody's going to kick your door down.
Okay, well, from people like Charlie and from people like Greg, and they make good points, some of them, but I mean, I'm sorry. And maybe the NRA's into propaganda like any other large lobbying organization. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and let people say that our current president, who's not as strong on gun rights, perhaps as some past presidents, whatever, is out there to take guns away from everyone. That's simply not the fact. President Obama did more for the stockholders of ammo and gun companies. They love him. Because when he got elected, a bunch of people, probably like Charlie here, thought, oh, they're coming for my guns, and they bought everything up. Well, here we are now, almost 8 years later. That sure didn't happen. And I'm going to tell you this. And he may want to pass some regulation, which I think a lot of right-minded, rational people think might be a good idea. But he's not. Anyone who comes up to me and goes, well, yeah, the government's trying to take all our guns away. You're full of crap. That's just not the case. Anyone who thinks that, there's, oh, Nick, you're so naive. No one. The Second Amendment, it's just not going to happen. The guns are never going to be taken away from America. It's just not going to happen. Oh, you're naive, Nick. I'm sorry. You're crazy. It's not going to happen. Now, John, you're not nuts. Now, I understand that people are trying to place restrictions that you object to, but don't sit here and tell me that there are politicians here, and yeah, there are some extremists that want to take guns away from everyone and have this be not a single gun in America. It's just not going to happen. And someone who believes that is crazy.
There are extremists on both directions.
But
and so we do have some
politicians. We're all out to take all our guns away. No one's out to take all your guns. Come on, John.
I think as a practical matter, it's going to be, but I say that, but it happened in England. I don't think it's likely to happen here, and I don't think it's likely to happen within our lifetimes.
No, I mean, come on, I don't know anyone, even people who object to gun violence stuff don't like the idea of having guns taken away from everyone, especially even if it could, because it would be taken away from the law-abiding people, and he's right, Charlie's right, the crooks are still going to find a way to get them.
The crooks are still going to have them.
So no one is advocating that across the board. When people say, oh yeah, the president's... How much money did he make for the gun companies and the ammo companies?
He's made a significant amount of money. But and I think I think certainly there are politicians and segments within our population, the very small minority,
yes,
that if they could, their utopia would be no guns.
Right. Okay, but again, as you say, that there's these factions that are a little bit.
I don't think they're going to get there.
And that's just never going to be a reality. It's just not. It's just not. I don't think.
The bigger battleground is stuff
on
like
the regulations.
On the regulation side,
like I understand that.
We had a federal appellate court decide on Monday.
Yeah.
They issued an opinion out of the Second Circuit that I think it's New York and Connecticut ban the AR-15 type weapon from civilian ownership. They completely banned civilians from owning those weapons in those two states.
Okay.
And the Second Circuit rendered this just sort of, you knew when you said Second Circuit what their result was going to be before you read the opinion. Okay? But they made a finding that these particular guns are the kinds of guns that the Second Amendment protects. They got that right. The Second Amendment protects military-grade weapons.
Okay.
The United States Supreme Court said that in Miller. They said millions of Americans own these kinds of guns. Mm-hmm. And then where they got completely off track was they said, yeah, it's a constitutional right, but if the government can articulate any reasonable reason to prohibit civilian ownership, then the law passes constitutional scrutiny. And what they said was New York and Connecticut have made the finding as states that these particular weapons are more dangerous than other weapons. And so that's a reasonable determination, and they can therefore ban guns.
Now, does that make a little sense? I know Greg was saying a gun is a gun is a gun, but I mean, it's safe to say that some guns, they can all kill you if hit in the right spot, but some guns perhaps capable of doing a little more damage than others. I think most people would agree that a machine gun potentially could do more, not potentially, can and does do more than a single shot .22 revolver. Come on.
Well, the fact is, technically, yes. Okay.
Could do a lot.
Standing on the firing line, they may throw more ammo downrange.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The fact is, though, more injury and death occurs from the handgun.
Okay, maybe. All right.
In this country.
Yeah.
Than from the assault weapon or the machine gun or the
because there are a lot more people in possession of handguns than machine guns.
They're just easier to carry, easier to conceal. You can carry a lot more ammo in them.
Yep.
And, you know, if I'm sitting here with my handgun, they don't see it on the camera.
Right.
If I'm sitting here with an AR over my shoulder, it's a little more obvious.
Yeah.
So the finding that they're more lethal or more dangerous, I think you're right. It's the bullet that causes the injury. They're just the projectile that launches it.
But some are more powerful or can fire more at a time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But, you know, you look at these mass shootings, and most of those, you look at Columbine, you look at Oregon, some of them involve rifles. More frequently, they're involving shotguns or pistols.
Okay. Listen, did you say we need to take a break, Mary? Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, Linda, Jeff, and others will get to your calls right after this. Stay with us.